Have you ever stumbled upon something that made you go like, wait, what? This is exactly what happened to me a few years ago when I saw a little-known front-end framework. But before you click away, I'm not trying to sell you on a new framework. This is going to start as a talk about a framework, but it's more of a meta discussion on coding, software design, and problem solving. So if you're into that, make sure to stick around. I stumbled upon it as a backend engineer, mostly coming from a Ruby on Rails background. And if there's anything you need to know about the Ruby on Rails community back in 2016, 17, 18, is that we really disliked JavaScript. We rendered all our views on the server, we fearlessly made n+1 queries in the process, but overall it was happy times. At the time, my team used AngularJS for some of the more dynamic parts of the UI. And while it miserably failed at many things, it did one thing very successfully. It killed my ambition to work on the front end forever. However, I still loved building products, and I searched forever for something that seemed like a reasonable way to build UIs. React was getting hugely popular, but somehow it lacked elegance. All of the build steps, the synthetic DOM events, the incredibly over-engineered state management, it was all way too much. But then I found a framework that changed my perspective on writing software in general. I promised on the Discord server that I will make a dedicated video about it, so this is it. So what makes it so special? It was just one simple idea. Most UI frameworks allow you to describe what the UI should look like given the data you have, and they will take care of updating the UI in case the data changes. But the catch is, this is a very difficult problem. The prime example of this is the useState hook in React. The React team was like, well, turns out we can't solve this problem, so we're gonna make it your problem instead. From now on, you have to announce anytime you change the data. It's so funny how they even managed to sell this as a major win, a better way to build apps. And this idea of tracking data changes was quickly adopted by almost every framework, even modern ones like Svelte. They go as far as building a custom compiler to determine the inner dependencies of data, just so that it can make the most optimal DOM update. The problem with this approach is that it's optimizing for the wrong thing. Consider Ruby on Rails. You don't even need a benchmark to tell that it's slow. It is actually perceivable. But in its day, it was faster than most. Not at runtime, but at development time. And this is the reason the biggest platforms that we actually love today are built on Ruby on Rails. For example, GitHub and Spotify. It's because Ruby on Rails allowed them to iterate and build out the features they wanted faster than anything else. The front-end community at the time loved abstractions. They loved to flex their lead code skills a little too much, and we ended up with hugely bloated frameworks and solutions for years. But Mithril, the framework that I discovered, decided to put the foot down and say, enough is enough. What if we get rid of all of that complexity, we acknowledge that most of us aren't building incredibly complex UIs, and what if we stop rendering on data changes, and instead we render on events? So you can have any data in any shape or form and we don't care. But if the user produces an event like a click, and you have an event handler attached, we will update the UI after the event handler is done. It's a clear transaction, and I can hear so many people saying things like, but no, that's not optimal, what about this case when this happens, and so on and so on. But look, I'm sure there is a framework that optimizes for your case. Generally speaking though, when you don't have to track the data changes, you actually win back a lot of performance. It doesn't matter how many properties are modified, there is only ever gonna be one render. This is very much in line with the expectation of the user. I click on something, the UI updates. It's clever and elegant. It's a perfect example of the 80-20 principle. It accomplishes 80% of what other frameworks do with less than 20% of the code. That is a huge win. One more feature of this framework is the stability of the API. It hasn't changed in 3 years that I've been using it. It's feature complete. When I code in it, I never Google. I don't need the Copilot. I don't spend my time prompting ChatGPT. I just write code. That is more valuable to me than anything any other framework can promise. People who've been around in the industry for a while know very well that what one developer can do in a month, 2 developers can do in 2 months. Having less code optimizes for the single developer case, which is very rare these days. The reason Mithril changed the way I write code is that it challenged the assumption that our users want the fastest performing app at any cost, even at the cost of never having enough time to build the features the users actually want in the first place. That is not true.